Up to this point in the previous examples you've done in this lesson, and if you've done any ones out of the textbook, you're going to notice that in most of those cases, you're given the region where all three characteristics represented by the circles of the Venn diagram, you have that number that meet those characteristics. What happens when you have circumstances where that is not the case? This example is going to be the first of two that you're going to look at where you're not given that piece of information and what you would need to do to adjust in that kind of circumstance. So you're given a survey of 300 parks, which showed the following: 15 had only camping, 20 had only hiking trails, 35 had only picnicking, 185 had camping, 140 had camping and hiking trails, 125 had camping and picnicking, 210 had hiking trails. You are to determine the number of parks that A had at least one of these features, B had all three features, C did not have any of these features, and D had exactly two of these features. So give this problem a try, see what you could possibly figure out as answers, and then we'll go over how to go about attacking this. Okay, this one is a little bit more of a challenging problem than many of the ones you're going to see in the textbook problems that you're asked to do. And that's because if you notice, a lot of the ones in the textbook, they would usually give you the piece of information about, like, they would already let you know where all three, or how many had all three of these, characteristics. Now, you notice that's actually one of the questions you're being asked here is like which one has three of the features, which is a piece of information that was normally given to you. Now, without that piece of information, making the Venn diagram is a little bit more difficult, because that was you had to start with that typically because that was the one piece of information you had in most problems that defined a very specific region of those three overlapping circles, whereas a lot of the other information was involving two regions that form from the overlapping circles. Um, Now, luckily, though, we are given some information that deals with, one specific region of this Venn diagram. So let's have a look at just the information now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up with the Venn diagram, and with the Venn diagram, I'm going to make use of that to answer any questions that they could possibly ask of me. And so I'm going to let C stand for the parks with camping, H the parks with hiking trails, P the parks with picnicking. And there's my circles set up and so forth. Now, as I said again, one of the reasons why we always start with this piece of information where all three circles overlap, because that's one of these specific regions here. I have other smaller regions, bigger regions, but they're just one region. Whereas if I look at stuff like 185 had camping, well, that's this region, this region, this region, this region together. That information doesn't help me figure out anything specific because all I know is that circle is going to have a total of 185 parks in it, but I don't know which ones are going to have things that are shared with another park, with another characteristic. Which one's going to have all three characteristics? I have to, try to, figure that all out along the way with this. So not having that information about this middle region certainly makes it a little bit more challenging. Luckily, though, they do give us information that would go into one of these specific regions. And that's these first three comments, because they say 15 had only camping. That means it's this region right here in the orange, in this orange circle, that's only orange, not the part that overlaps with the pink or green circles. It's just this orange part right here. So I know 15 would go right here. Um, so that's not the total of the circle. That's just this part that's out, side of the other two circles. 20 only had hiking trails, so I know 20 goes out here. And I had 35 only picnicking. 35 goes out here. So at least I had some information about single regions of this. I still now I'm given all the information that's left is going to be a combination of regions, and that makes it difficult for me to be able to figure out how to go about doing that. Because as I said, typically we'd be given this region here, and it makes it a lot easier to work your way out. So I'm going to take this piece of information here about 185 of these parks had camping, And I'm going to call these regions X, Y, and Z, where I have overlap with circle C and the other circles. Those are the regions that are formed. And based off of that information, I know that 15 plus X plus Y plus Z, that makes up this entire circle here, that should total 185. Which means X, Y, and Z should sum up to be 170. That doesn't let me figure out alone what either of them are, so I need to come up with another piece of information that might help me along the way. And the next piece of information comes along that makes it really helpful. 140 had camping and hiking trails. That means that I'm looking at this overlap right here, which is basically comprised of Y and Z together. So I know that Y and Z together, or Y plus Z, would equal 140. Well, Y plus Z is part of this equation that's up here. So I could do a replacement and say, okay, well, based off of these two equations, X plus 140 should equal 170, which means X would equal 30. With that information, I can now start figuring out some other pieces of this. Now, I know that it says 125 had camping and picnicking. Well, that's this region right here with this overlap. And this overlap has 30 as part of it, and Y being the other part. So Y is the only unknown value I have there. So I know that 30 plus Y is 125, which means Y would be 95. So now I know what Y is. And not only can I replace it here, I can replace it up here in this equation where it says 95 plus Z equals 140. Well, subtracting 95 from both sides, I would get Z equals 45. Now, with these pieces of information all in here, there's only a couple more regions I need to be able to fill in that are left. I have this region right here, and I have this outside region. So having that 210 had hiking trails, that means that everything in this circle here for H should total 210. That means 20, 45, 95, and whatever's in this last region here. So with that information, I'm able to figure out that this region out here is 50, because that's the only thing that's going to make it this pink circle total 210. With all of these now known, I come up with the fact that, okay, well, these have 290 of the parks out of this 300 in here, which means 10 of these parks had none of these features. So now my Venn diagram is all done. And with my Venn diagram all done, I can now go back to the question. Because now I can actually answer these things. So pulling up my Venn diagram, how many had at least one of these features? Well, having at least one of these features means that, well, they have to fall in, any combination of what's in these regions of these three circles, which means basically A, having at least one of these features, and C, having none of these features are exact opposites. So these two should total 300, which means, okay, well, we know 10 of them did not have any of these features. So I figured that out first. And with that being the case, if 10 did not have any of these features, 290 had to have at least one. B had all three features. Well, this is this region right here, the one that was elusive for me at first, which made this a little bit more challenging to answer. So we know that's 95. And lastly, had exactly two of these features. Well, having two of these features and not any more, or not any less, would be this region here, and this region here. And when I total those together, I get 125. And that is the end of this video. If you have any further questions, please make sure to reach out and ask me about it. Until next time, have a good day.